Good morning, everyone. How are you? So happy to have you here. I'm Nicole Clausen, and I'll be presenting with you today. Can everyone hear me okay? Hi, Beth. Hi, Heather. Hi, Devin. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, depending on where you are. I am in Montana, and it is currently -2 degrees. So hopefully you're somewhere a little bit warmer. So I'm very excited to have you here. Perfect. So just a couple things before we get started. Sometimes crowdcast can be a little funny. So if for some reason, you have like a little IT problem, just refresh the screen and usually it solves quite a bit of things. The other thing is on the kind of lower part of your screen, you'll see a button that says ask a question. If you have a question, just go ahead and drop your question in there, and I'll go ahead and answer it. If you drop it in there, I can timestamp it for in the replay, then people can kind of go to that exact section. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I'm really excited to have you guys here. We're going to be talking about quite a bit, so hopefully, just feel free to use the chat if you have questions or run into anything, or the ask a question box, and we'll just go ahead and get rolling here. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the top 5 problems and how to solve them. So I work with practices across the country, strictly on inventory. That's like all I do. And so I have noticed no matter where you are in the country, what size of practice you have, whether you're companion animal, livestock, equine, it's kind of these 5 problems. I did add 2 more, so there's technically 7, but I feel like that's okay. We'll just go ahead and get started. So, my name is Nicole Clausen. I am the owner, lead consultant, lead person at Veterinary Care Logistics. So I am a consultant and educator for veterinarians in their teams, strictly on inventory management, right? So I don't really work with any other things except for inventory. So my story, I very first started at a veterinary practice when I was 16 as a receptionist, and I just was like, oh, this is just a job to get me through high school, and then I'll go get a different job in the field that I want to be in. Never really considered working in veterinary medicine before then. And I absolutely loved it. And here I am. I was like, and then when I got to college, I was like, oh yeah, I'll just like work at a vet office while I'm like in college, and then when I graduate, I'll just do something different. Well, here I am. I have my degree in animal science, or I'm sorry, I went to school for animal science. And let's see, probably 4 or 5 years ago now, I got my first job managing inventory. And I will never forget it. So never really managed inventory before. I'd kind of like done some food ordering in the past. I was like training on a Saturday, I think, because the hospital was closed, and she was kind of like showing me things, and she was like, yeah, when it looks low, to reorder it. And I was like, well, how do you really know when to reorder it? And she goes, well, when you shake a bottle and it feels low, that's when you order it. And I remember to myself, I was like, wait, no. Like, what does low mean? Like, what is that even about? And so I tried to like further clarify what actually low meant. And it was just kind of like, well, when it looks or feels low. And then that's about all the training I got. And then she left the practice like 2 days later. So I just remember thinking to myself, I was like so confused, so lost, and I don't even want to think about my first orders because they were probably like the cringiest of cringy orders because I had no idea what I was doing. No one else at the practice really knew anything about managing inventory, and I was like totally lost. And so I was like, well, this can't be good. So I basically developed my own system, learned everything I possibly could, and I just took it upon myself and I completely changed the entire inventory system and taught myself how to do all these things, worked with some great mentors, and kind of started my inventory from there. One of the interesting things was when I was going through this, the Avamark, which was the program that I used at the time, was not set up really at all for inventory. So I had to completely change that. They hadn't done any counting in over 9 years. So that was definitely crazy town. But that's kind of what started and fueled my passion for what I do today, because I felt super alone. I had no idea what I was doing, and really I didn't have anyone to turn to or any community. So that has been my biggest driving force for starting my company, was to make sure that somebody else doesn't have to feel that alone, and B, they can get the resources and help that they need. So that's really why inventory is so important to me. Just so that no one has to feel like, what am I supposed to even be doing right now, right? So that's why inventory is super important to me. So if any of you follow me or have worked with me before, you know I'm super big on communication. So if anyone has any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is hello@vetlogic.co. Now it's not .com, it really is .co. When I set up my website, I really didn't think that through too great. You can also check out my website at vetlogic.co. So that's my scoop on inventory. And so let's talk about why it's actually important, right? So inventory is the second largest expense in a veterinary practice. So it's second only to labor costs, but here's the caveat. I have seen inventory be the largest expense if it's mismanaged. So typically you can see it range from 15 to 35%. I've even seen it go higher. So it's a huge chunk of your revenue. So anytime inventory is mismanaged, it can wreak havoc on your labor costs, right? Because you have like people running around, they don't really know where things are. You have like 10 people ordering, like, it just kind of turns into like this mess. Second, any kind of excessive inventory costs, So with mismanaged inventory, you can quickly have excessive inventory costs due to expired goods, over or under ordering, really a multitude of reasons. So it can quickly inflate those inventory costs, and it can increase your team frustrations, right? So if we think about it, you are in the room and you have Mrs. Jones and she has Fluffy, and Mrs. Jones is, not super big on preventative care. She really just came in for a rabies vaccine. You spend all these time going over, some flea and tick medication or heartworm prevention, and the importance of it, and, the positive benefits. And, you're really excited about it. She's really excited about it. Everyone's like, for go. You go in the back to grab Fifi's heartworm prevention and you're out, right? Isn't that just the most frustrating thing ever? So, and it just totally takes the wind out of your sails, and the likelihood that she's going to come back to pick that up is like slim to none. And then in her mind, it's kind of like, what? They're out, right? So it's kind of like this client service issue too. So proper inventory control is really just critical on a number of levels. But let's look at two different scenarios. So we have Hospital A and Hospital B. So Hospital A has a revenue of $1.5 million. Their cost of goods as a percentage of revenue is 30%. So cost of goods as a percentage of revenue, that's typically how, our costs are expressed for, all of our inventory costs. So those include like pharmaceuticals, prescription diets, lab costs, both in-house and reference lab, anything that's like a cost of goods or like a cost of something that we're basically selling to that client. So their cost of goods as a percentage of revenue is 30%. That means dollar-wise, they spend $450,000 a year on inventory or their cost of goods. Now, if we look over at Hospital B, they have revenue of $1.5 million, and their cost of goods is 18%, or they spend $270,000 per year. Now, I'll just quickly share that benchmark generally for cost of goods sold is a great place to be is between 18 and 20%, right? So Hospital A is about 10% higher than the benchmark. So the difference between Hospital A and Hospital B is a difference of $180,000, right? This could be used to purchase a brand spanking new ultrasound and give a staff of 15 a $10,000 raise per year, right? So one of the things that I'm super passionate about is, that paraprofessionals are taken care of, paid well, and really that we just generally support them, right? Because you'll do a really great job. Hospital can't function without you, and you should be celebrated. And that also means that you should be paid well, right? So we have kind of this thing in our industry where paraprofessionals are not paid that great at all. Not even a little bit, right? So our salaries, half the time are like equatable with somebody who works fast food, right? Like that's not cool. So improving your inventory costs and reducing your cost levels is something that you can do today, tomorrow, to put more revenue back in your hospital's pocket and get more revenue available to equate back to staff raises, staff training, anything like that. So if we save and have our inventory at a reasonable level, we can reinvest that back into the staff. So if you look at this, I just want to make one more point on this. So if you look at it, we have like 30 versus 18%, right? That kind of looks a little bit small, but when we think about 1, 2, 3%, but our revenue is in the millions and millions and millions of dollars, that equates to tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars every single year. So it adds up fast. Okay, so let's just look at this in a little bit different way. So we have Hospital A and we have Hospital B. So Hospital A has a revenue of just $2 million. Their cost of goods is at 28%, which is $560,000. Their EBITDA, which is basically the profit after, taxes, blah, 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 all the boring stuff, is $300,000. Then you look at Hospital B, their revenue is $2 million. Their cost of goods, though, is 20% or $400,000, which makes their profit $460,000, which is an increase of $160,000 or a 53% increase, right? So if we just decrease our cost of goods by 8%, it gives us an additional $160,000 in profit, right? So just think about that. What could your hospital do with an additional $160,000 in profit? I mean, you could hire somebody, you could get an underwater treadmill, you could get, I don't know, the possibilities are endless, but it's just exciting to think about, right? And it's something that we could do today, tomorrow, to make a positive impact on our hospitals. So this is Tank. He is my soul dog. He's a Great Pyrenees Malamute. He just turned, he's actually 9.5 now. He has lupus. That's why his nose is a little bit funny. He has a little pink nose. But he is basically in all of my branding. So if you follow me for any length of time, you've probably seen Tank at some point. And this is him. So aside from finances, why is inventory important, right? So the whole goal of having inventory is that we have the doctor's preferred supplies in stock to practice their best medicine, right? Without inventory, we can't treat our patients. Without inventory, we don't really have a hospital that can function, because how are we going to treat our patients without inventory, right? So it may not be as fun as treating patients, managing inventory, but without inventory, we can't treat our patients. So It's really helpful to have. And we also need to have the product in stock to resell to pet owners, right? We have Mrs. Jones who really needs her heartworm prevention, or she needs her joint supplements, or what have you. She really needs to have those in stock, especially if she just drove 40 miles on icy roads when it's -2, right? If I drove 40 miles on icy roads in -2 degrees and it wasn't in stock, I mean, I should have called first, but still it'd be super frustrating for me. So here's how to calculate your cost of goods. So it's really easy. You only need two pieces of information. So you'll need your annual revenue and your annual cost of goods sold. You don't necessarily need to do this on an annual basis. You could do this on a quarterly or a monthly basis. Just make sure that your revenue and your cost of goods sold are from like the same time period. So, and you can get your revenue usually from your practice management system or QuickBooks, and same thing with your cost of goods sold. That can be done from your practice management system or QuickBooks. If your practice management system isn't super accurate with inventory, you may want to look at the cost of goods sold from QuickBooks instead. So the formula for this is you divide so it's just cost of goods divided by your revenue, and then you times that by 100 to get the percentage. So, and again, like I mentioned, the benchmark is typically between 18 and 20% is an excellent place to be. Equine hospitals are higher. Sometimes they're kind of like closer to the 22 to 24% range. If you're a livestock practice or a food producing practice, it can be even higher just because the margins on livestock practices, like the profit margin for inventory, is so low. So what are some of our biggest culprits for high cost of goods, right? So I feel like these three things are the biggest contributors. So, right, we have overstock products. So this means we have, like 3 years worth of flea and tick prevention. We have, 92 flavors of pill pockets, etc. So just like we have product coming out of our ears. On the other front, we can have too many kinds of products, right? So maybe it's where you have every single type of flea and tick prevention in every type of size in both the 6 and the 12-month size, or the 3 and the 6-month size. And so you just have like this, just so many different types of products. Same thing with ear cleaners. Like maybe you have like 14 types of ear cleaners, 72 kinds of non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. I never exaggerate, but so overstock products and too many kinds of products, that can raise your cost of goods very quickly. And also having no clear system of what and how much to order, right? So if you aren't really sure how much you're ordering and you're just like, oh, this kind of looks good, that will very quickly raise your cost of goods. Okay, so let's talk about the inventory benchmarks. There's a couple things that we want to look at. So how do we know if we're moving our inventory in the right direction, right? So these are some really helpful tools to see if your inventory is, kind of moving in the right direction. It kind of helps you to see the health of your inventory, etc. So we look at what's called inventory benchmarks or key performance indicators, and you may see this as KPI. Hold on just a second. I have my dog, Mackenzie. Stop. You know how it goes. Okay, so 3 different really important key performance indicators are your cost of goods sold, right, which we talked about in previous slides. So looking at these as both a percentage of your revenue. Typically, I like to look at it as a percentage of your revenue because, your revenue may change from year to year. So the percentage kind of gives it a, baseline for what you're looking at. So the other inventory benchmark that we can look at as your stock value of your inventory on hand, right? So typically a good place to be at for your stock value is 12 to 18,000, $12,000 to $18,000 of inventory on hand per full-time equivalent veterinarian. So it's kind of a mouthful, but if you look at it and you kind of calculate your stock value and you're like, oh, we have $22,000 on hand per full-time equivalent veterinarian, you can be like, oh, we have product that's overstocked, and that can flag in your head to be like, oh, maybe I should look at this. So the other thing is inventory turnover. So inventory turnover is a really great way to see the health of the inventory and how fast things are moving. So inventory turnover, typically kind of the goal is you want it to match your billing cycle, right? So if you're on statement billing, then having a 30-day inventory turnover is going to be really helpful, and get that product in and out before you have to pay for it, essentially. So the whole idea is that you sell your inventory before you even have to pay for it, right? That's the ultimate goal. So some items, maybe that you buy in like a bulk quantity or that don't move as fast, you may see like 30 to 60 day range for that inventory turnover. So that basically tells you how many days it's sitting on the shelf for. Food, though, should be even less because it is such a huge storage concern that your inventory turnover for food should be less than 30 days. Usually I feel like 14 days is a good one for that. Okay, so before we get into the 5 problems that I see, I want to talk about 5 helpful mindsets when you're managing inventory, right? So first one is just to be curious. Sometimes I know that I like to strive for perfection, and so when something doesn't work, I get really frustrated. So, to be curious can be really helpful, to be like, oh, our cost of goods are really high this month, what might be going on, and just opening it to be open to curiosity rather than judgment, to be like, oh, I'm so horrible this month, my cost of goods are so high, right? But to shift and kind of reframe that to be like, but why, right? And so that also lends us into trying stuff. You're like, let's say your staff members are not that great at writing stuff on the want list, so you're like, oh, maybe we could try reorder cards, maybe that might work. Or you can try using your reorder points in your software system, etc. So just be open to trying new things to see if it works and if it helps. So the third helpful mindset is to reframe problems, right? So we look at it from a detective point of view and not perfection. So again, going back to that curiosity, anytime that there's a problem with your inventory, this is especially helpful when you run out of something. Like, let's say you ran out of, worst case scenario, rabies vaccines, right? That's something we never want to run out of. But if you run out of it, rather than being like, oh, this is seriously the worst, to kind of reframe it and look at it like, how did this happen? What steps led up to this failure? And what can we do going forward to make sure this doesn't happen again? So another helpful thing to do would be to ask for help and ideas from this community or your hospital. So maybe you have a lead technician or, one of your doctors, you can be like, hey, I'm noticing we're running out of this item really frequently, or we're having this problem. Do you have any ideas and input on how that might improve? So a lot of times they'll have some great suggestions or even just ideas to help you kind of kickstart that brainstorming process. So the other one is to trust the process. So, when you're fixing and kind of transforming your inventory, it's kind of a long process, right? We don't immediately see those results, but if you are, putting in the work and you're putting in all that effort, to just trust that, with your hard work, that it will improve. Maybe not tomorrow, but it will. Okay. So let's look at the top 5 plus 2 mistakes that I see in clinics across the country. So the other thing is basically all hospitals find inventory challenging, right? It's a pretty common thing. So if you're finding that you're really frustrated and, you know, it's a struggle with your inventory, that is okay. It's super, super common. There is a lot of people that are here for you, and I have been doing this a long time. If you need to vent or you want to bounce some ideas off me, feel free to email me. I'm seriously always here. Okay, so sorry, I have to get some water. Okay, so mistake number 7. So I'm going to go backwards, basically from 7 to 1. So mistake number 7, hospitals don't have systems and standard operating procedures in place for things like expired products, increasing prices, special orders, and adding new products and hospital supplies. So where this comes into play is, actually, I'm just going to check the chat because I can't see the chat. So I'm just going to make sure that everyone is. Okay. All right, sorry, I'm just checking in, looking at the chat here. So, all right, so I'll go through quite a few of these questions, but it looks like there are some technical problems. Yes, so if you're having any technical problems, just refresh the screen and usually that helps. Okay, so going back to it, I just wanted to make sure that people could actually see me or see what I was doing. Okay, so let's go back. So, mistake number 7, hospitals don't have systems and setting operating procedures in place, right? So I'm not talking about the standard operating procedure for step 1, 2, 3, 4. That's not really what I mean. It's more of do you have policies in place so for when things come up, you know how to address them and quickly. So for the example of expired products, it's more does your staff know what happens if there's expired product on the shelf? What do they do with it? Do you have a system for checking every month? What happens if they find something that's expired, etc. So it's just kind of what do we do when these things come up? So it's just having that standard or that policy in place. So when something kind of comes up out of the ordinary, no one panics, right? We're not oh my gosh, this Mrs. Jones wants to return this product and I don't know what to do. And, Susie up at the front desk, she's flustered because she doesn't really know. And then somebody asks a technician in the back and it just kind of creates this turmoil that's not really necessary. It's not, we can avoid it. So that's the whole point of having these kind of systems in place. So same thing for increasing prices. So there are some hospitals, that I have helped, or seen that have not increased their prices in years, right? And so worst case scenario, I found some items that actually cost higher than the client was paying for it. So essentially that hospital was paying for that client to take that item off our hands, right? Worst case scenario. So increasing prices for treatments and inventory items can, and just having a system for that to make sure that we are increasing our prices every time that we get a cost increase, right? Because it's happening all the time. So same thing for special orders, making sure that if Mrs. Jones wants to buy a special bag of food, that, everyone in the hospital is on the same page as far as what we're actually going to be doing with that, so it doesn't sit in the back kind of collecting dust and then she never paid for it and then the hospital has to take that loss for it, right? So we want to avoid that. The next one is adding new products, right? So this is especially important when usually after veterinarians or other staff members come back from a big conference, right? There's so many cool products, so many new things, and everyone's super excited about them, and they all want to try them, and then you buy a bunch, and then it just sits on the shelf collecting dust because everyone forgot about it, right? Again, worst case scenario, but having a policy in place to make sure that, there's not like a ton of products being added to the formulary at any given time is going to be really important. So next is hospital supplies, right? So, how do you handle those? Does it just kind of like stay in your inventory eternally? How does it get reordered? How do you know when it's low, etc.? So all of these things can be really helpful to figure out, and have kind of a system in place for them. So mistake number 6. So I see sometimes, fairly often actually, that clinics don't use their practice management system, or it's not set up correctly, right? Now, I know that practice management systems are frustrating, to say the least, and sometimes feel like you're trying to herd cats when you're working with them, but most of the time, generally speaking, their inventory modules can help you. So you can set them up with reorder points. So a reorder point basically tells you when you need to reorder something and how much you need to reorder it for. So if you have these set up in your system, let's use the example of like Neopolydex, right? So it's like in your system, it says, okay, when I have 2 boxes of Neopolydex, I need to order 4 more if it's not on back order. That's besides the point. You can run a reorder report when it's time to place your order, and it'll say, you need to order Neopolydex and Dasiquin Advanced and rabies vaccines. So in addition to people writing them on the want list, you can use this reorder points in your practice management system to kind of act as a double check and a double count to see if something needs to be ordered. The other thing that you can use your system for is to look at your sales and usage information, right? So the whole point of, ordering for our inventory is based off of how much we're actually using or selling. So we can quickly look up this information, usually quickly, depending on the software, within your system. The other thing you can do is to use the purchase order function. So, I'll talk about purchase orders here in a little bit, but they can be very helpful in making sure that your kind of inventory is moving in the right direction. So mistake number 5 is that hospitals don't utilize the purchase order function to increase prices, update costs, and maintain quantity on hand. So I personally don't like to use the purchase order function as, like, here, I'm going to print this purchase order off and send it to my distributor. No, I like to actually, I guess pause for a second. Is anyone using VetCove? If anyone is not using VetCove, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It's completely free for private hospitals. There's basically no downside to using it. I think it's almost like using Expedia for inventory in your hospital. So we basically like log on to VetCove, you search, lorazepam, and all your different distributors will pop up with the prices unique to your hospital and to see if they're in stock. So you can quickly see if your prices are, who has the best price, and you can quickly see who has it in stock. So with this crazy back order thing happening right now in all of the pharmaceutical land, you can easily see who has it back ordered and who has it on hand. So just a side note, VetCove is super great in that way. Okay, coming back to these purchase orders. So again, I don't like to use the purchase order function, as kind of like a way to, as like a way to like call in or fax in or whatever, email in to your distributor. I like to build it either before or after I place my order, but the main reason is to increase the prices, update the cost, and maintain quantity on hand, right? So in your practice management system, there'll be an area where you can have like a markup percentage or a markup amount. So if that price increases by $2, from the last time you purchased it, it'll automatically mark up that product based upon the new cost of that item. So it's a way of keeping track of price increases, etc. So the other thing that I've seen is that some inventory managers will manually go in and update the quantity on hand for each item that they've ordered. So, like, let's say if they ordered 3 bottles of 100 tablets or capsule gabapentin, they will go in and manually adjust that quantity on hand to add in 300, right? So that is not an efficient use of your time, right? There's so many more important things that you can do with your day besides manually increasing those quantity on hands. So using that purchase order function will kind of like automatically increase that quantity on hand and keep it much more accurate. So, and with the purchase order function, because there is, you can, it'll increase your quantity on hand, you'll get a much more accurate report of your actual stock values on hand. Right, so this is where the case if, maybe it's never received and into the system, but it's sold through the system. So, you look at your Apoquel one day and it's like negative 17,000, right? You're like, what? So using that purchase orders can really kind of help maintain that a lot easier for you. Okay, so, and this is my Amelia. She is also a Great Pyrenees, and she is basically, in one word, naughty pants. She has a mind of her own. Don't all Pyrenees though. Okay, so mistake number 4, your physical inventory is unorganized, right? So this results in quite a few different things, expired products, over ordering, and it can kind of increase your cost of goods very quickly. And the reason why is, like let's say you have like a central storage, but it's like kind of just like basically the equivalent of like the clinic's junk drawer, right? Everything is just kind of like thrown in there. When an order comes in, it's just kind of like thrown in there. You don't really know A, what you have. You don't really know B, where it is. And then if somebody else comes in that room, they're like, they look at it and they're like, I have no idea what to do with this. So they don't know where things are. And so because no one really knows where it is, you could not have any, or you could have a huge case of it. And then if you think you don't have any, and then you order some, and then it just all kind of, goes to the wayside. So having a really clean and organized central storage is great, to have everything like labeled and bins and really nicely organized. Pinterest is your friend for this. So I actually have a Pinterest account just for inventory and veterinary medicine. So there's actually a lot of ideas for pharmacy organization and veterinary organization in general on my Pinterest account, or just Pinterest in general. So feel free to check that out. Okay, so mistake number 3. So hospitals carry too many products or too much stock on hand, right? So if we remember the previous slides, these things can really increase their cost of goods very quickly. So usually for this, so I usually recommend having a primary and a secondary product. So for example, flea and tick. Let's say right now you have Simparica, and you have Bravecto, and you have NexGard, and you have Vectra, and you have Credelio, and Revolution, and, some of the others. I like to have just a primary and a secondary product. So you could have one oral and you could have one topical, or maybe you have a primary and a secondary, oral. This goes for like joint supplements. Let's say you have like, 6 different kinds of joint supplements. You have Cosequin and Desiquin Advanced and Desiquin Regular and Desiquin with the MSM, and you have Glycoflex and, all the glycos. Let's pare those down to a primary and a secondary product. So that also means products individually are overstocked. So let's say you have 4 cases of ear cleaner. Really anything that's above and beyond, approximately, of course, 45 days worth of stock is considered overstock. There is, of course, exceptions to this, like food, anything like that. So, but generally speaking, anything above 45 days, it's probably overstocked. Bulk orders. So this can be where, maybe your rep comes in, they're having like a huge sale on Bravecto, and they're like, oh, here, this is your recommended order. And you're like, oh yeah, that looks great. Okay, thanks, bye. That is never a good situation because, like I'm going to talk about again, our purchasing should always be reflective of what we're actually using and selling in the hospital, and never like, oh yeah, that looks great. It's always like, oh hey, how much did we actually sell last month? Okay, mistake number 2. So this is controlled substances. So mistake number 2 that I see is controlled substances are not handled correctly and hospitals are not in compliance with the DEA. So this is a lot more critical than having, like overage of inventory, because, if your inventory is out of control, you're just spending a lot more money than you need to be. If your controlled substances are not under control and you're not in compliance with the DEA, the registrant could lose their license, be fined a crazy, crazy amount. They could, all the horrible things that could happen, right? So our controlled substances are nothing that we want to mess around with. So one of the biggest things is taking the necessary steps to prevent diversion, right? So, limiting access, making sure not the whole staff has access to the controlled substances. Maybe cameras need to be in place, whatever steps need to be taken to prevent diversion. Unfortunately, with the opioid epidemic, drug seekers are realizing that veterinary hospitals are very much an untapped resource for them. So the DEA is starting to look a lot more heavily at veterinary practices, but there's also more drug seekers that are, looking towards veterinary practices kind of to fuel their addiction. So one of the other things that I see is that hospitals aren't tracking unopened bottles. Some states require what's like called container tracking, some don't. But I always, always, always recommend tracking unopened bottles, because let's say, for example, if you have 2 bottles of something go missing, how would you know, and how long would it take you to find out? Because unfortunately, the most usually the most theft that I see with controlled substances is taking of unopened bottles. So if you aren't numbering them, if you have no way to track exactly how many bottles you should have on the shelf at any given time, you're opening yourself up to diversion. So the other thing is not receiving inventory or handling receipts correctly. So this can be, maybe you're not filling out that 222 form, the paper form, once you receive inventory. Maybe you're not signing your receipts. This can be a number of things. A lot of times I see that hospitals are not completing your biannual inventory. So a biannual inventory is a complete, thorough inventory that should be done every 2 years of your inventory and kept on file. It needs to be like witnessed and signed by the registrant. So it's really important that that's done every 2 years. The other thing that I see is that cycle counts are not completed or logbooks are not getting reconciled. So we'll have it where maybe like several months have gone by and logbooks haven't been reconciled, controlled substances haven't been counted. No one really knows how many of anything are in the safe, right? So I always recommend cycle counts and logbooks should be reconciled at least weekly. If you're a very busy hospital, you may have to do it daily. But this really should be done on a very regular basis, because if the DEA were ever to come on site, knock on wood, that, I'm glad that didn't make my dogs bark, that your logbook should be up to date for the second that they are on site. So I'm going to show you a couple of things here. Okay. So Susan says we love our Omnicell. Yes, all of those The dispensing cabinets are great. Okay, so I want to show you kind of a logbook here so you can kind of see how you can have yours set up. So here's kind of like the first page. You can see the heading here. Oh, it's totally backwards. But there's a split place for you to see like your date received, your vendor, your unique bottle number, serial number, expiration date, total units received. So any kind of unopened bottles, that's going to be super helpful in that. Then as far as like dispensing, I'll kind of show you here. So you have a place for the date, the client and the patient information, the address or the patient ID, the unique bottle number, the reason notes, who it was dispensed by, the amount of waste or any hub loss, amount added, amount used, and ending balance. So there's kind of like an example of, a controlled substance record, and then you can make sure that they're up to date at any given time. Okay. Okay, so it looks like, so quite a few people kind of going back, used Vetco. That is awesome. Shannon asked if there's anyone here that uses the purchase order system in Avamark. Shannon, I have, and I do, well, I guess back when I was still in practice. So if you have any questions on it, let me know. I also have a video on YouTube about how to enter in purchase orders. So it looks like quite a few people use that purchase orders. That is excellent. Yeah, so Shannon, I just saw your email down here, so I'll definitely send you an email with more information about using the purchase order function. Oh, it looks like some people's video and this controlled log, drug log, I actually published them. I worked with several DEA agents to actually publish these, so these are published by me. Sarah, I can definitely send you some more information on using the purchase order function in Cornerstone. Feel free to email me and I can send you more information on that. If anyone, again, is having technical difficulties, refresh your page and it should help. Okay. So we're going to go back here to... Okay, so here's kind of we talked about mistake number 2, the controlled substances not being in compliance. So mistake number 1. So again, there's my little tanky tank. So mistake number 1 is that inventory is not ordered based on usage. So for example, I will ask practices, oh, how many of this do you order? Why do you order this amount? And they'll say, oh, we keep 5 on the shelf because that's just how we've always done it, right? And they don't necessarily know how many they sell in a month or what have you. It's just they keep 5 on the shelf because that's how they always have done it. So again, it's really key to make sure that you are basing your inventory ordering off of what you're actually using and selling. So this is especially true for bulk or promotional orders. So anytime that you have any kind of like bulk or big order, it should really be based on how much you're actually using and selling in your hospital. Let's say that you get 90 days special financing for that order. You should buy 90 days worth of product. So again, the whole idea is that we sell our inventory before we ever have to pay for it. So the other thing is if inventory is not ordered based on usage, then reactionary ordering happens, right? So like, let's go back to our rabies vaccine example. If your rabies vaccines run out like panic ensues, right? Everyone is panicked, right? So let's say if like it's your day off, rabies vaccines run out, people are panicking, like no one knows what to do. Somebody calls the distributor and orders like, 10 trays of rabies vaccines, but let's say you maybe only use one a month, now you're going to have this huge surplus of rabies vaccines, and so it just kind of like turns into basically a hot mess, right? So when we order on a reactionary basis versus, kind of planning ahead and strategically, it kind of opens us up to a lot of chaos. So the bottom line is creating an inventory strategy, no matter what it means, is really the key to making this all work. So it's like having those policies for that weird kind of situation, or using your practice management system to kind of use those min max quantities, those reorder points, whatever kind of the terms your software uses. Having a system in place and a strategy for controlled substances and preventing diversion and being in compliance with the DEA. So creating that inventory strategy is going to be key. So if you think about it, going grocery shopping is kind of the same way. Let's say, you go grocery shopping after work, you have like a grain of rice left in the cupboard, right? And you're totally out, you're hungry, you're irritated from work, right? So you go grocery shopping without a plan, and maybe you're hungry. You end up majorly over budget. You have a million snacks because you're like, oh yeah, this looks good and that looks good. But then you actually don't get any groceries for actual food for meals, right? It's just a reactionary thing. So it's the same thing with our inventory. If we don't have a plan and a system in place, it's like, oh yeah, let's order that and that and that and that and that. And oh yeah, that looks good, right? So how do we become more strategic with our inventory, right? So the whole goal is to no more haphazard reactionary ordering. We want to order with a plan, with a system, and have that policies in place. So if you are wanting to create an inventory strategy and transform your inventory, how do we go about that, right? There's a couple ways, right? So it's basically just learning what that inventory strategy means and how to implement it into your practice, what your cost of goods are, and if you need to lower those, and what that means for your hospital. So in summary, your inventory project, first of all, who does it involve? Who can you get to help? What specific tasks need to be completed? Do you need to organize your central storage, or maybe you need to organize your food room, or limit some of the products you have on shelf? Then what can be delegated? Is there anyone else that can take over a task, etc. Next, how can it be measured? So are you going to look at your cost of goods as a percentage of revenue? Are you going to look at your inventory turnover? Or are you going to look at your amount on hand? And how will this process be documented, right? How will you know if you're really improving and transforming your inventory? And then to set a goal and a deadline. So resources that you can use: the Veterinary Inventory Strategy Network. I'll go over that in a second. If you need controlled substance logs, I publish them. The AHA has some. Henry Schein has some. Titan Group, they are ex-DEA agents. They are great, and they can definitely point you in any right direction. I also have several articles on my blog, on my website, and here's the link to my Pinterest where you can, get some inspiration. So, kind of go back here. Okay. All right, so let's look at some of these questions. Oh yes. So it looks like Jen, here is the logbook again. So this is the cover, kind of show you the inside. So here's the dispensing section. Hopefully you can see that okay. And then there's the unopened container section right here. So here's kind of like the flow of what will happen. So basically, let's say you order midazolam, you get midazolam in. When they come in, they should all be given unique bottle numbers. They should all be logged into an unopened container log. And then once it's open for use, it should be logged out of your unopened container log and into the dispensing log. And then you enter in each time that drug, medication, substance was dispensed. Amanda, yes, these are DEA compliant. I worked with several DEA agents in making these. You can purchase these on my website or on VetCove. Okay, now the other thing that I want to show you, if you are looking for, oh yes, Shannon, what I'll do is I'll just copy and I'll copy and paste it into these comments so that it's like a clickable link for you. Okay, and Michelle, what kind of documentation should be kept if we switch to your controlled logbooks in regards to previous containers? So do you mean that your current controlled substances are not being logged, or they like don't have bottle numbers? Yes, and I will be getting to the ask a question section very shortly here. So you should really keep record of whatever you're using. Any kind of controlled substance record needs to be on file for at least 2 years with the DEA. Sometimes your states are a little bit more. Okay. So going into the question and answer section here in just a second, but I do want to show you this really quick. So I have been working on this for about 6 months now, and this is a little insight into what I'm launching. It's called the Veterinary Inventory Strategy Network. There's 2 options. One is a free option, one is a paid option. But in the paid option, and it's like literally, it's like less than a cost of an office visit per month. We're going to be doing weekly master classes, weekly live coaching sessions, weekly question and answer sessions. So there's like a ton of like live help that you get every month. And there's going to be different themes every month. So like this month, we're focusing like cycle counting and amounts on hand to kind of get you ready for your end of year counts. We're going to be doing like online pharmacies. January is controlled substances. So each month there's like a lot of information centered around a specific topic. And so if you kind of go in here, so this is the group section. And so you get your like coaching calls and mastermind archives. Here's kind of the elite inventory strategy headquarters where you find like all the information. You get member spotlights from, other members, kind of what they're doing, what's working, what's not. There's special groups for large and multi-location practices, equine practices, all of that. There's also courses. There's going to be like local meetups. You can meet members that are like close to you. If there's like a large, I thought it would be like really fun if there's like a large group, like there seems to be a lot of members in Texas. Like I can fly to Texas. We can all meet together, So there is, so I'll put the information in the chat for you. So this is just launching, and I really, really appreciate everyone's like support in what I'm doing. And I wanted to offer like a founding member special price. So normally it's $50 a month, but if you are interested in becoming like a founding member, it'll only be $30 a month forever. Are the courses on the website that meet CVPM standards. So I'm actually working on getting all the master classes and everything race certified because I am a race certified instructor. So it's just a matter of getting all of those things race certified. So that's in the works for sure. So I'm like super excited about this because having like weekly live masterclasses, webinars, group coaching, like I'm so excited about it. So anyways, just wanted to share that with you so that you're kind of like the first group of people to see that. So it's a little bit, it's just exciting, a little nerve-wracking. Okay, so let me just put in the link so that you can learn more about it. I would seriously love to have you guys be a part of this. It's going to be really cool, and there's going to be a ton of stuff. The whole point is that we have a community together to transform our inventory together. Okay, so here is some information on that. I just put it in there for you. Okay, so let's go to the question section here. So question from Colleen says, how do we set reorder points for products not in your system, like IV catheters, needles, etc.? Yes, this is great. So what I would do again is all those reorder points for products not in your system are going to be just set a little bit differently. So I actually have a bunch right here. These are reordered, reorder tags. These are from MWI. You can get them for free from any distributor. And basically you attach these to, and they serve as like a physical reorder point. So like, let's say for example, IV catheters, when you have like 20 IV catheters on hand, you want to order 50. What I would do is rubber band this reorder tag to the last 20 IV catheters. And then this tag ideally is pulled off of those and kind of like put in a bin so that you know when it's ordered. Beth says tags are so much fun, especially if you like to laminate. Yes, I love tags. They're helpful to kind of serve as like a physical reorder point. Okay, so Meredith had a question. So I have a question on to keep inventory turnaround for only 30 days. What about things that are used periodically that I need just in case a client comes in and needs the RX or product? So Denise added a comment, try and let the client know you carry it just for them and give you a heads up of when it's low so you can get that for them, or utilize platforms like Vet's First Choice to describe about things that you don't carry turn over fast enough. Yes. So anything that you don't normally stock or that you don't sell a lot of, this is of course exempt from like emergency medications. But for things that you don't sell a lot of, using an online pharmacy can be a right way, to keep those. Okay, so I find reorder tags stuck to the wall or in the trash. Ugh, that is horrible. That is awful. Okay, so that's so frustrating. Okay, so one of the things that I also love, in addition to laminating in Excel spreadsheets, is command strips. So I try and make it as painless as possible. So you can take like those command strips in like those little dollar store bins and like command strip them like on multiple places in your stock room or like on the inside of the cabinet. But that sounds so frustrating for you. I'm sorry. Okay. So then for special orders would be wise choice for them to prepay for the items. That's what Amanda asked. Yes. So if you have clients that always come in for their special orders, they're very regular to it, maybe you don't need to, but as a general practice, if you're finding that somebody wants to order something as a special order and then you're sitting on it, I would 100% recommend prepaying for that. Meredith said we have our clients prepay for anything that anything we order that we don't normally keep on the shelf. Yes, I think that is great. Is using VetCove okay when you're a VMG clinic that has signed a non-disclosure agreement? Yes. So actually, like 99% of my clients are VMG members, and a lot of them, if not all of them, use VMG. And actually, the founders of VetCove, who are amazing, by the way, their dad actually owns a practice, and he is a VMG clinic. So I would, just double check with VMG, but I've asked VetCove several times, and they say it's okay for VMG clinics to use VetCove. Okay, Tammy asked if I'll be able to print the notes out after the meeting. If you would like the slideshow notes, just feel free to email me, and I'm happy to send them to you. It looks like Rachel missed out on the 5 problems because their computer froze. Oh no. So actually, once this live broadcast ends, the replay will become immediately available. So you'll be able to replay this at any time. What is a cycle count for controlled drugs? Chrissy asked. So that's a great question. So cycle count basically means that you are counting a small amount of your inventory very frequently. So basically what it means to cycle count your controlled drugs basically means to count your controlled drugs as a group much more frequently than you maybe would your other substances. So general rule, once a week. You may need to do it every day. Some even need to do it every shift. As long as you know where all your controlled substances are at any given time, that's what's important. Okay, so Lexus asks, in Cornerstone, we're having issues with it not properly being put in the quantity on hand. It will say we have -5, but we have 45 in stock. We have been trying to fix it, but we're not sure what we're doing wrong. So Cornerstone, there can be several problems. So first thing I would look at is your buy-sell ratio. So the buy-sell ratio tells you for how many, if you buy 1 case, it contains 24 cans. So sometimes that can be a miss. I would also check the quantities when you're receiving them just to make sure that they're accurate. You may want to do when you do a complete count towards the end of the year, kind of get a good baseline and kind of monitor those. It can also help to do cycle count. So that's one of the things we'll actually be talking about next week. So the Strategy Network launches November 11th. So on the 12th, we're going to be having a big webinar session on cycle counting, getting your practice management system accurate, everything like that. So that'll be happening November 12th. But I would, if you're not doing cycle counting, I would start cycle counting so that you can kind of start to fix these errors more frequently and kind of maybe identify what might be happening, where it might be going wrong. So Jody said, can we have more free webinars in inventory and more specific things to work on? Yes, I like doing webinars. They make me a little bit nervous, but I think they're really fun. So I would be happy to do some more webinars. Okay, Tyler asked, would it be a good idea to go through our inventory and count everything so all of the numbers are up to date? And that way we can set reorder points. Yes, so if you aren't using reorder points, one of the keys to making sure that they work is having an accurate inventory count on hand. So if you haven't counted everything in a while, it would be a great thing to do. How can you get let's see. So how can you get a report on how many days it takes to sell a product in Avamark? So unfortunately, Avamark, that's one report it doesn't have. But what you can do is you can hand calculate your inventory turnover. So there's like a formula for calculating your inventory turnover. If you go ahead and email me, I can go ahead and get you the formula for that to calculate turnover. Okay. So does anyone have any other questions that I can answer? Okay, let's see. Deanna says the problem I have with them prepaying is that if the price goes up and we/the receptionist are unaware of the increase, they can be undercharged. Yes, that is a problem. So what I would do is whoever is the inventory manager or whoever is doing the purchasing, whenever you place, well, let's see. Hopefully that shouldn't be happening too often, but if you are noticing that that's a consistent thing, an online pharmacy might be a good idea. Otherwise, I would try to keep your costs in the computer as accurate and up to date as possible. I was thinking you could have, whenever the inventory manager places that order, to look up the price and then kind of prepaid that way and then maybe call the client. But if they're in the hospital at that moment, that wouldn't really work. Oh yeah, here, I'll put my email address right in the comments. And just remember that it's .co, not .com. Because otherwise I will not get it. Okay. EasyVet has that, which is great, and I realize I can put in a section on the POs. Yes. Oh yes, I use the graph feature in Avamark to see how many items we go through a month. I love the graph feature in Avamark. You can access it when you're in the RX screen, you can right click on the item and then go to graph, and then you can take a look at the graphs. It's pretty sweet. Okay, so if anyone doesn't have any other questions, we will end for today. It was wonderful having you here. What are the reorder tags from MWI called? To get these, you'll just need to talk with your rep. Just ask your rep for some reorder tags and you can get them. You can also get them from Covetrus. I believe that Patterson has them. Just ask your rep and they're free. So don't pay for them or anything like that. You can get them for free. Okay, well, thank you all very much for taking the time out of your day to join me. It was very fun, and I hope you enjoyed it. Oh, Zoetis also has tags. Wonderful. I didn't realize that they did. And feel free to just be in contact if you have any questions, and you guys enjoy the rest of your day.